Welcome to Life on Earth. Welcome to Life on Earth. Welcome to Life on Earth.
I don't know. I think I need to modify that. It sounds a little minor key. Oh, we had a little echo here too. Let's kill the echo action there.
Wow, it's psychedelic.
No, man. Everybody's all like, wow, I thought they were a professional operation. That's what happens when you take the computers you use in your studio and you use them for other things. So welcome to Life on Earth. Hello, you good people.
Everybody. Welcome to Earth.
We are glad you are here. You know, I feel like we just spoke.
Yeah.
Since we had the great fun of hosting yesterday's The Daily Objective, episode number 397, Race, Gender, and Ethnicity, West Side Story. That was a good discussion, but we didn't take it into the holidays, and that's what we need to do because I have a gift. I have a gift for you. We did that last week. We gave you a gift. We gave you the most awesome music playlist. If you haven't listened to it yet, get on that. It's in the show notes for last week's show. We'll add it to this one as well. But also, if you haven't yet heard Yaron Brooks' recent discussions of individualism versus nationalism, you know, he had the big debate in Austin, Texas, with Yaron Hazony representing nationalism and Yaron Brook representing individualism, Yaron versus Yaron. I don't know why they didn't bill it that way. It just seemed like the obvious way to do it.
Yeah.
And Yaron has had 2 shows since then, breaking down the debate, giving the recap. In fact, links for that are also in our show notes on my Facebook wall. And Rucka here on the Ayn Rand Center UK's channel did his own recap. Link for that is also in there. That was TDO, Daily Objective, 394. And again, the topic for all of this and a whole bunch of other discussions that Nikos and Mark and others have been involved in is individualism versus nationalism. You know, we've got a couple of fans, or at least regulars to our chat, who are sympathetic to nationalism. They kind of conflate it with patriotism. I love America. Hey, I love America. I love America because it's where we live. No, because it's actually great in its founding principles and in many ways still today. But
and unprecedented in human history.
Unprecedented in human history. You know, some of the precedent was set by England and the English common law and then the Magna Carta.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It was unprecedented. We read the Declaration of Independence. England didn't in a million years imagine that. And this keeps coming up, and there's a reason for that, because it's more than just anti-nationalism. These discussions we've been having lately, that Yaron's been having, that we've been having in response to that, and in response to the news, and in response to West Side Story, and in response to woke and the culture war, it's more than just anti-nationalism, and it's more than just anti-woke. There is a reason why this philosophy is an individualist philosophy. It's about the fact that individualism, you, the individual, you are the only real thinker, the unit, the standard of value. You are where the mind is. And some of those minds are already on the chat. Hello, Jennifer. Hello, Marius. Jean, Apollo Zeus is in as well. We got a lot of people in the chat today. Excellent.
Welcome.
Pablo is on. Excellent. There's a great story about
Marius.
Pablo there that he gave me the opportunity to write a special Christmas card for him. If you're not on our Christmas card list, you've got to Facebook Messenger me your address. I started writing and sending out those cards. Anyway, individualism, not just anti-nationalism, anti-woke. There's a reason why this philosophy is an individualist philosophy. And that's what I want to talk about today. We touched on this in April, way back in April, when we had an episode on the end. The end? Yes, the end. You as the end, an end in yourself. And read a couple of quotes from Ayn Rand. I'm only going to do 2 today, but I'm going to reread them because this is part of your Christmas present. I'm going to start with the early Ayn Rand. Copy of the updated paperback here. Last time I had the soft cover. Where'd my big copy of that go? There is an excerpt from Ayn Rand's novel, We the Living. in there, the hero of the story, the heroine, Kira, one of her most beloved stories, which indicates her sense of life and her ethical beliefs, was about a Viking.
Mm.
And little bits of that were used in We the Living, parts of it were left out. And so here in the early Ayn Rand, there are extended excerpts from what was edited out. Leonard Peikoff picked this out to include, and I'm just going to read a paragraph here. At the end of the excerpt, pick up a copy of the early Ayn Rand to read the whole thing. The Viking, this Viking in this story had just been pursued by the king.
Mm.
You will work for me and you will help establish the kingdom and conquer foreign lands and the bad guys and come back and I'll make you important in my... And the Vikings said, no, I'm not working for you. I'm not part of your hierarchy.
I don't want to be the economic dictator.
Yes. Yeah. And the leader of the church came to the Viking and said, work for me and you'll be in the church hierarchy and you will be anointed with God's blessing and all of it. And the Viking said, no. And there's a whole story. You've got to read the story. And then at the end, it says, the Viking smiled as men smile when they look up at heaven. This is in the moment of his victory. The Viking smiled as men smile when they look up at heaven, but he was looking down. His right arm was one straight line with his lowered sword. His left arm, straight as the sword, raised a goblet of wine to the sky. The first rays of a coming sun, still unseen to the earth, struck the crystal goblet. It sparkled. With a white torch, its rays lighted the faces of those below. To a life, said the Viking, which is a reason unto itself.
Cheers to that.
Why do we fight for individualism? So we can get more freedom, more capitalism, so we can beat the left or beat the right? Why do we fight for individualism? We fight for individualism because your life is an end in itself, and your life is an end in itself because you are the unit of value. And why are you the unit of value? Because you are where the action is. You are where the mind is.
Yes.
We're not anti-socialist because communism fails. We're not anti-collectivist because it doesn't lead to as good an economic system. All of those things are true. And they matter and they're important and they're part of the fight. But why are we individualists? Let me jump to Anthem. Links to Anthem, incidentally, in the show notes. If anybody hasn't read Anthem yet, unfortunately, the original publication, the British publication, the copyright lapsed.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually read it for free on the internet. Links are in the show notes. But you should buy a copy from Amazon because there is nothing like the Dead Tree version that I'm holding in my hot little hands here. It also includes, this is great, it's a short story. So half of the book is the original edits Ayn Rand made to that British version you can get for free. And all the things that, if you think there weren't many changes, I mean, look at this. This is great. So you want this version of the book, trust me. I'm going to jump to chapter 11. Spoiler alert, if you haven't read Anthem yet, it won't necessarily give away the plot of the story, but it will give away something. Chapter 11. I am, I think, I will. My hands, my spirit, my sky, my forest, this earth of mine. What must I say besides? These are the words. This is the answer. I stand here on the summit of the mountain. I lift my head and I spread my arms. This, my body and spirit, this is the end of the quest. I wished to know the meaning of things. I am the meaning. I wished to find a warrant for being. I need no warrant for being and no word of sanction upon my being. I am the warrant and the sanction. It goes on like that. Again, if you haven't read Anthem, you must. If you haven't read it recently, you should again.
I definitely should. I haven't actually read it in a while. And I remember a lot of it still, but
Yeah.
it's time.
And because of the copyright status, it's also easy to find audiobook versions. I would definitely say your first time through, read it on paper. But if you're revisiting it, it's very easy to take it in these days. Only runs, I think, an hour and a half.
Mhm.
Again, it's a short story, a novella, some describe it.
Yeah. A lovely afternoon, as it were.
Yes. I'm going to jump from Ayn Rand
Mhm.
to Walter Williams,
Okay.
the late economics professor Walter Williams, because we're talking about individualism and we're talking about, as suggested by Anthem, a sanction for your being. Walter Williams did something amusing. He was part of the culture war back before woke. And he was addressing the question of white fragility. No, he was addressing the matter of white guilt.
Mhm.
And how white guilt actually got in the way of resolving the remaining race divisions and racism out there. And so he produced his Proclamation of Amnesty and Pardon granted to all persons of European descent. This is great. He used to read this on the radio when he would guest on various radio programs,
So
including
that's
Rush Limbaugh.
Very magnanimous of him.
Very mad. Well, you tell me. It's not long.
Yeah.
Whereas Europeans kept my forebears in bondage some 3 centuries, toiling without pay, Americans of European ancestry are guilty of great crimes against my ancestors and their progeny. But in recognition, Europeans themselves have been victims of various and sundry human rights violations, to wit, the Norman Conquest, the Irish potato famine, the decline of the Habsburg dynasty, Napoleonic and Tsarist adventurism, and gratuitous insults and speculations about the intelligence of Europeans of Polish descent. I, Walter E. Williams, do declare full and general amnesty and pardon to all persons of European ancestry for both their own grievances and those of their forebears against my people. Therefore, from this day forward, Americans of European ancestry can stand straight and proud, knowing they are without guilt, and thus obliged not to act like damn fools in their relationships with Americans of African ancestry. I just love that.
I feel the weight lifted.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great piece of satire there.
It's something you didn't need to hear, and yet in a way you kind of did.
Mm.
It makes me think of the film Good Will Hunting.
Mm. I'll take the wrench. Well, no,
Yes.
actually, that's a little bit of a different context, but how would you say that reminds you of that?
Spoiler alert, you should see Good Will Hunting if you haven't yet. There's a character in the film who suffered a brutal childhood, and he's talking to a psychologist. And the psychologist trying to break through to this guy. He's got the world's biggest chip on his shoulder, and with good reason. And at one point in the conversation, therapist says to our protagonist, "It's not your fault."
Mm. Mm. That kind of gets me choked up. It's getting you choked up, isn't it?
Yep. And the protagonist suffered through child abuse and all this. He knows what he went through.
Yeah.
And he says back to the therapist, yeah, I know. And the therapist says, no, it's not your fault.
Mm.
And, the protagonist gets angry. It's like, I know that. But he needed to hear it.
I think I got something in my eye.
Yep. And,
Yeah,
and obviously the Walter Williams piece is just funny. It's amusing.
Yeah.
And yet it makes a point, again, which you already know, we all know, we don't need some gentleman, some Black economics professor to say, hey, I'm Black and I can tell you none of this is your fault. You should never feel guilty for it. Reasonable people don't feel guilty for this. It's not exactly the same. But it's a clearing of the air. It's basically somebody reasonable saying something reasonable. And that's why it's very funny, including his comment about speculations about the intelligence of Europeans of Polish descent. In our youth, they called those Polak jokes.
Yeah, or the stereotypes, with Irish people and Italians. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
A lot of things that people had to overcome because of their background. Not to make it sound that what African Americans had to go through was smaller than that, but yeah, everybody has their own challenges, and you have to look at them individually.
Yes. So I would say I didn't necessarily need Walter Williams' sanction, but I did need some of what Ayn Rand gave me. I needed that sanction. So I said, when I announced the show, that Amy and I would offer you this Christmas gift, a gift of sanction. Well, it's not us offering it to you, it's Ayn Rand offering it to you. And really, ultimately, and this is really the most heartfelt, should really get you, it's the sanction you offer yourself.
Yeah.
It's that moment of standing on the mountain and saying, oh yeah, this is my life.
Yes.
I think of the sequence, I made a note of it from Atlas Shrugged. Another spoiler alert for Atlas Shrugged, in which one of our antagonists, the head of the state, I love how Mr. Thompson is the head of the state. He's not given a title because it makes the story more timeless. And, in different countries, they have different prime minister and president, and head of the state has got the hero of the story, John Galt, locked up. And they're trying to get John Galt to take over the economy. They're trying to get him to help them get through this crisis, get us through this. He says, oh, that's easy. Just get out of the way. Well, no, that's not what we meant. We want to stay in control, but we want you to tell us how to make it work. And he refuses. He tells them it can't be done, but they say, well, you could do it.
Somehow.
Yeah. So, well, what could we offer you to work with us? And our hero says eventually, well, what on earth, Thompson asks, what on earth do you want? Well, we'll get you to work with us. Galt answers, what on earth do I need you for? Huh? What have you got to offer me that I couldn't get without you?
Yep.
There was a different look in Mr. Thompson's eyes when he drew back as if cornered, yet looked straight at Galt for the first time and said slowly, without me, you couldn't get out of this room right now. Galt smiled. True. You wouldn't be able to produce anything. You could be left here to starve. True. Well, you see, the loudness of homey joviality came back into Mr. Thompson's voice, as if the hint given and received were now to be safely evaded by means of humor. Well, what I've got to offer you is your life. It's not yours to offer, Mr. Thompson. That ability in a moment like that to say, my life is not yours to offer, that's the meaning behind individualism. There was a conversation recently, I think it might have been on one of Yarn Brooks' shows in the chat, might have been somewhere else. Somebody had asked the question, what does Ayn Rand mean when she says evil is impotent, that it has no power but the power that you give it? From Galt's speech. Obviously, evil does all of these things. Evil is destroying the world. It's got enormous power. And you got all these rich people and cronies with all this money. They've got power. And what does she mean when she says evil is impotent? It has no power except the power you choose to give it. And that's the deepest answer, is that to the extent that evil remains in power, it does so purely as a parasite. What evil is a destruction, and to the extent that it seems to have or produce anything, that comes from the actual producers. And while in any given moment you might be, in a sense, hostage to that, without the sanction of good, without the acquiescence of good, without the products of virtue, evil would starve both morally and existentially. And again, that's why individualism versus nationalism, it's not a political debate.
Right.
It's a moral debate. And it's an epistemological debate.
And I would also say it's a metaphysical debate.
You're right.
In terms of the nature of man, the nature of our capacity to reason, and that, the reason is the attribute of the individual. And yeah, you can't get around that. That's why socialism doesn't work. It's because you cannot, you cannot conform people into collectives. Oh, hello there. Hello, Amy Echo.
It's interesting.
It's more psychedelia today. That's why socialism or any form of collectivism cannot work. You cannot form individuals into groups in a metaphysical way, and that is what communism and socialism try to do, or any kind of collectivism.
It's like filling your gas tank with water. It simply doesn't work. It simply defies the facts of reality. The fact is that any given mind is an individual mind. Again, this is why individualism versus nationalism, it's a joke to think that there's even a real debate there. And that's made clear when you listen to Yaron talk about it, especially if you remember that perspective. I've said before on the show many times, it's one of my favorite expressions, probably because I made it up so I don't have to pay any licensing fees. We are surrounded by miracles, appropriate to the Christmas season. We are surrounded by miracles. Just the lights and the technology, but also the roads and the bridges, but also the houses and the cars, but also the literature and also the art and also the million things that we're surrounded by. And when I use the word miracles, and I've explained it before, what I mean by miracles are the products of a division of labor society, the products of minds working on the problem of survival and creating these magnificent things which me alone on a deserted island, a desert island, or a desert island could never have produced on my own. I could not have done this. I could not have made the computers that I'm using to broadcast the show, or the fancy microphones, or the mixers, or the lights, or now the neat thing about that is all of those things were produced by individuals working together, or individuals working independently on inventing these things. And me going out and working as I did in the technology field was able to produce the wealth equivalent of what it took to trade for that. It's all a trade. It's all win-win. It's all good. But we are surrounded by miracles, not least of which is ourselves.
And not least of which is Ayn Rand Center UK. Yes.
Yeah, we don't have any super chat. We got some great chat going on. I love some of the comments, which I need to read. But we don't have any super chat. We need at least one super chat today, because when you put in a super chat, a question with some dollars behind it, it goes to support the Ayn Rand Center UK. All of you all should be members, but if you're not, sign up at aynrandcenter.co.uk, center spelled British style. Link will be in the chat there. But yeah, somebody give us a super chat. We need one in there. I need to see that little bit of color, that highlight.
Yeah, it just gives us a real pep in our step. It gives us a real thrill to see a super chat. So.
That's right. Well, it's Christmas time. I'm already pretty peppy and pretty steppy, but I would love to see a super chat come in. Yeah. In the meantime, Enric says, "Now, where did he just write that? I guess it just scrolled past my screen. See, if I use my mouse, it might turn the volume control back on, but not really. I won't make that mistake again." But no, Enric has a lot of good comments. But
Johnny,
he said, "Uncheck your privilege," and I love that. Exactly right. Uncheck your privilege. Look in the mirror and say, I don't owe anybody anything above and beyond what I have traded, what I have chosen, what I have done voluntarily. And Johnny and Marilyn have come through. Johnny with $25 says, "Merry Christmas." Well, thank you. We will take the Merry Christmas and we will send the $25 to the Ayn Rand Center UK. Not that we have the ability to do that, but that's how it will work out. Thank you, Johnny. Very much appreciated. And Mary Aline is in for $5 with one of her cute little icons there. Thank you, Mary Aline. Caught you this afternoon on the boot camp, and that was pretty cool too.
Yes.
The communication boot camp, which I listened in on while I was putting together the last of the show notes for this, one of the perks of signing up as a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK, you get to participate in those calls. And if you're as brave as Mary Aline is, you even get to talk and give a impromptu talk. And Pablo is in. For Bolivian $25. Have no idea what that works out to, but it's awesome. And he says, I love your work, Amy and Robert. Thank you for that. That's very flattering as well. Too cool. Excellent. Oh, great. We got some color in the chat. So now I can wind this down. I can wrap it up and I can give you that gift. You know, we're surrounded by miracles, products of individual minds, just like yours, and working together. But you know, I hate that idea of tribes because it sounds tribal. Go to Nikos and say, yeah, we should be more tribal. Well, he won't shoot you.
Well,
he'll shoot you rhetorically. He'll put a rhetorical bullet in your head.
As in the great quote once said, let's be independent together.
Let's be independent together. I don't know. If the word tribes resonates with you, if that works, fine. I mean, the ARC UK, you know, all the folks, the members and the fans and all the good people in our chat, and really objectivists more broadly, the whatever the number is, the 100,000 or million people out there who are fans of Ayn Rand and who actually live these ideas. We are a community.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a community
well, the
is
words
a good
in,
word for
the
it.
words in my mind are, we are a community of kindred spirits.
Yeah, yes. Let's make a new word for that, please.
Well, spirit sounds a little woo, but I like it because consciousness, a man's consciousness is more than just his rational thought. It includes his emotional mechanism, but also it includes his memory. It includes his imagination. There are many aspects, which is why words like one's spirit or one's soul still resonate. And I'm good with those words. We can take those back from the woo hustlers and own them. So what I want to do for Christmas is say thank you to all of the kindred spirits out there. And by kindred spirits, I mean that soul, that spirit, that one consciousness, that mind, that me, that is you. And
maybe Aristotelian concept of friendship.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Amy and I wish a heartfelt Merry Christmas to that me, that is you.
And thank you, Enric.
And Enric is on board too. Joy
you.
to the individual. You know, joy, I talked about how reason is an attribute of the individual. It's only individuals have minds. But Enric says joy to the individual, and it reminds me that your emotional mechanism is singular and unitary. There's only one thing that experiences joy, and that is an individual living organism. Mm-hmm. Even when you get home and your dog runs around in circles and he experiences that joy, even at the animal level, it is one entity doing that. You know, we can get together like this, across the miles on the internet, all you good people around the world, down in Bolivia and over in Europe and everywhere. I shouldn't say down. Why is the South down? And anyway, we can all get together, have this meeting of the minds, a little bit of community here. And it's all individuals. It's all each and every one of you. And I never forget that. I never take it for granted. And that is the level on which, if we're going to solve the problems of race and ethnicity and divisions in gender and the deeper, I shouldn't say deeper, the broader issues of government and collectivism versus individualism, and get back to a limited and representational government, it's going to be because of respect for the fact that each of us, each individual, not just that we have rights, but the reason we have rights is because the individual is where the mind is. The individual is where the action is. The individual is what you are and I am. And my Christmas present to you, which again isn't coming from me, it's coming from Ayn Rand, is that sanction, that reminder, that identification that your life is your life. Your life is an end in itself. You need no greater warrant and no broader sanction than that. So Merry Christmas to that me that is you.
Yes, Merry Christmas. And I would say that that sanction is coming from, from Ayn Rand, because conceptually she's taught us how to view ourselves in that way, to view ourselves in the most healthy way, the most objective, the most reality-based way possible, and the most loving way possible too, on the emotional side of it. But ultimately the sanction comes from yourself.
Yeah, we have one more show before Christmas, and I think that maybe the topic is goodwill.
All right.
We've talked about it before, but there's more to say. Until then, we're going to go to Clubhouse for a bit. We'd love to hear back from you. Love to hear your beautiful voices. But in the meantime, one more time from me, from Amy to you, you individually, you know who you are. Merry Christmas to that me, which is you.